Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with Muchadeyi Masunda, former Mayor of Harare and current Chairperson of the Commercial Arbitration Center in Harare, a director of a number of companies. And we're asking ourselves, is the city of Harare ready for COVID-19? Enjoy this conversation. Much Masunda, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor. Thank you so much for creating the time to join us when you're in lockdown in your office or wherever you might be.
It's only a pleasure, Trevor.
Much, let's start at the beginning. You are a Bulawayo boy like me, born in Bulawayo in 1952. Speak to me about the way you were raised, as briefly as possible, the values that were inculcated to you by your parents, and the things that you can remember about growing up in Bulawayo.
Well, I had the privilege of being born and brought up in Bulawayo, and my parents were a God-fearing couple, and they were community leaders in their own right, the two of them. And my dad in particular, he was arguably amongst the first Shona-speaking people to settle in Bulawayo in 1915, and he served the community in Bulawayo well to a point where he became Ndebele by osmosis, in spite of the fact that he was obviously from Manicaland with a name like Masunda. But we were brought up in a very Christian environment, and we had good fortune of having the primary school where I started my education right across the road from where we lived. And right across another road was the boys' club that we all attended. Because the whole idea that was introduced by my godfather, Dr. Edmund Hugh Ashton, who was the director of the then Housing and Amenities Department in the city of Bulawayo, which later changed its name to Housing and Community Services, was to have a boys' club and a girls' club and a women's club in each of the townships in Bulawayo. And it was at school, well, starting at home, obviously, and at school and at those boys' clubs and girls' clubs that we had all these values inculcated in us. But one of the big things that came out of all that was the ability to mix with others and get on with others and play as much as you can in the sporting disciplines that were on offer, and including drama, obviously. But the key takeaway from all that was the ability to win or lose with grace and accept that there are other people that will necessarily be better than you in any given pursuit. So those values, I think, were deeply embedded in my life, and I think that's what affected quite a lot of things that I do. But the other thing that came mainly from my parents was the desire to serve the community without necessarily being remunerated.
Wow. So clearly, I mean, you then become an attorney, you become an international sports arbitrator. Much, I just want to alert the audience out there that your life deserves another full show, and we're doing this show in particular because of your experience as the mayor of Harare. I mean, you became over the past 40 years chairman of a number of companies, a director of listed companies, corporates, professional, educational, charitable institutions. But I want us to move straight to you being appointed the mayor of Harare 2008 for 5 years up to 2013. What were the surprises, Much, when you got into that office as mayor of Harare? What were the things that surprised you most?
Maybe to put it in context, Trevor, it did not come as a surprise that my election or appointment as Mayor of Harare came about. But to a lot of people, it would have made more sense for me to have become Mayor of Bulawayo, because my dad was cynically or jokingly referred to over the years as the unofficial Mayor of Bulawayo. So we grew up in an atmosphere that's not different from the one that Andrew Cuomo, the current governor of New York State, must have experienced, because his father served 3 terms as governor of New York State. So the bottom line in all this is simply this, that if you haven't seen it, smelled it, heard about it, touched it, tasted it, or felt it, you just won't do it. You won't relate to any of the things that need to be done in a lofty office like being mayor of the capital city of Zimbabwe. And one of the first things that struck me was how the systems had become almost moribund. They'd become dysfunctional because a lot of the people that happened to occupy that hot office or that hot seat did not do their bit, because these leadership issues, Trevor, it's like a relay race.
Right.
You go in and you do your race and you improve upon whatever it is that you've found. And when your time is up, you hand over the button stick to someone else. But sadly, the systems there had been compromised almost irredeemably, largely through the patronage system that had been introduced and had taken deep root. It got to a point where a lot of the people that were aspiring for office in townhouse, either as councillors and ultimately, of course, as mayor, appeared to be driven by a whole host of other considerations that did not appear to have any the remotest interest in serving the people that needed to be served, especially the vulnerable members of the community. And when you're talking of Harare, Trevor, you're talking of a modern metropolis which serves the interests of not only the people that live within Harare, but in the immediate vicinity of Harare, call it Greater Harare for want of a better name. And you're looking at close to 4.5 million people. And those people want service. They want potable water. They want to drive, those that are able to afford cars, on pothole-free roads. And maybe a good starting point, Trevor, is for us to take heed of the sage words that were uttered by the first Prime Minister of Singapore.
Yes.
Lee Yu, who was popularly known as, LKY. He said this, if you want a country to succeed, you must have a system that enables the best man and most suitable person to go into the job that needs to be done. And sadly, that has not been the case in our country, not only at local government level, but at central government level as well.
I'll stop you there, Much, and ask, why has that not been the case? Point number one. Point number two, you say they're driven by other interests other than serving the people. Why have we not gotten the best men and women into council, into parliament? And what is it that drives them to want to get into politics?
Well, it would appear that the main force that drives them is primitive accumulation of wealth, of assets, and because the thing that seemed to be uppermost in the minds of many people, both functionaries and council, is how many stands they are going to get out of their respective stints in what's supposed to be a service to the city. Let me move on, Trevor, to something that applies to just about every modern metropolis, be it New York City, London, or whatever. Yeah, the community system operates, in the same way as anywhere else in the world. And in the case of Harare, we had 8 communities. and were the inevitable Finance and Development Committee, the Audit Committee, the Business Committee, the Procurement Committee, and the Environmental Management Committee, the HR and General Purposes Committee, the Media Information and Publicity Committee, as well as the Health, Education, Housing, Community Services, and Licensing Committee. Now, amongst the 46 democratically elected councillors, 45 were MDC and 1 ZANU-PF who represented Harare South, which is Hopley, essentially. Now, when you look at the committees that I referred to, let's take the first four. Finance and Development Committee, Audit Committee, Business Committee, and Procurement Committee. Now, amongst the 46 democratically elected councillors, we did not have a single councillor with an accounting qualification. So how can you possibly have any councillor serving meaningfully and on any of those committees when you are talking essentially of what is arguably the second largest business enterprise in the whole country, second to government? The budget, revenue and expenditure budget for the city of Harare, it was in excess of $500 million. So we had an anomalous situation where the bulk of those democratically elected councillors, 46 of them, I'm not being unkind, Trevor, when I say well under 10 out of the 46 were in gainful employment at the time that they became councillors. And on top of that, at the time, we had 11 special interest councillors who were chosen by the minister responsible for local government, rural and development, and it happened to be Ignatius Chombo. And I had one hell of a task when we started. I spent the best part of 2 weeks interviewing the 46 plus democratically elected councillors plus the 11 special interest councillors individually, one-on-one, to find out what their respective strengths were, if any, with a view to making sure that they get slotted onto the appropriate committee amongst the 8 committees that I referred to. It was one of the most harrowing experiences that I had. And
so the long and short then, Much, is that the electorate, the voters, you and I, did not give you councillors that were competent, fit for purpose to serve the people of Harare. That's what you were essentially saying. So you and I are to blame at the end of the day, and the political parties that choose these people to represent us as Harare ratepayers. Is that correct?
I think that's a fair summary, Trevor, but a lot of this revolved around the politics of patronage, and also the toxic and polarized nature of politics in our country. So we have had a situation now for the best part of the 40 years where people get chosen to stand for either party, whether ZANU-PF or MDC, largely on their capacity to shout slogans. So I mean, this is a serious business. We shouldn't really be making jokes out of this, but that's how it is.
Yeah, and, because unfortunately, slogans are not going to run a finance committee. You need more than sloganeering to be able to run a finance committee.
Absolutely. And then what made the situation even worse is the fact that the model for virtually all the cities and towns in Zimbabwe, in the case of Harare, going back to 1890, when Fort Salisbury was established, the model simply says this, that the cities and the towns are going to generate their own revenue without any contribution from the fiscal purse. So what it really means, in a nutshell, is that the city of Harare had to generate its own revenues to meet the budgeted expenditure that I mentioned earlier of well over $500 million US. And the city does have assets, which if properly leveraged and made to sweat, that amount can be raised quite easily. It may come as a bit of a shock to you, Trevor, and the listeners, to hear that at any given moment, the city of Harare has got between 5,000 and 7,000 head of cattle.
Wow.
And when I discovered that, I asked my old friend Trevor Gifford, who was president of the Commercial Farmers Union, to send me some of his best cattle experts, because I'm blissfully ignorant about Mombes. And those guys did a desktop survey, which indicated that those Mombes, which are kept on 3 farms that belong to the city, on the outskirts of the city near the sewage reticulation plants, it's Ingwe Farm, Pension Farm, and Crowborough Farm. Now, if those farms are properly paddocked, the number of cattle could be increased quite easily to between 11 and 13,000.
So that's huge. So that's one of the assets that the city council has, in addition to ratepayers, in addition to, there was a time when they got revenues from the sale of beer, but that's been taken over. What other revenues sources do they have?
Yeah, well, maybe the main source of revenue, as you quite rightly point out, is through rates, which are paid by the property owners, residential premises, business premises, and so forth. But one of the tragic things that's happened in the last, I would say, again, the best part of, I would say maybe 30 years, the valuation role has not been updated in order to capture all these palatial mansions that have sprouted all over the place. You see them in Borodale Brook, you see them in Folly John Crescent, you see them in Chishawasha Hills. So there's an urgent need for the city architect in the Department of Works, ably assisted by the city valuer, to update the valuation role so that all those new edifices that have sprouted all over Greater Harare can be captured and the rates, bills revamped accordingly. But there are other sources of revenue. The traditional one, obviously, it was the rates and the beer account. In the case of Bulawayo, you'll recall Ingwebu.
Yes.
And here there was Rufaro Mamba and Rufaro Ngoto. So before the advent of Uhuru in April 1980, the urban local authorities had the monopoly of brewing and selling opaque beer. And that's where the beer profits came from. You and I went to Mziligazi High School, which was the first school in Bulawayo to be built out of profits generated from the sale of opaque beer. So those were the 2 main sources of revenue, the liquor, the beer account, as it was called, and the rates account. And the revenue generated through those 2 main sources were used, or rather channeled, towards financing the provision of health services.
Right.
In the case of Harare, you may be shocked or pleased to learn that the city runs 2 hospitals, Wilkins Infectious Diseases Hospital, Beatrice Road Infectious Diseases Hospital. And on top of that, the city runs 14 polyclinics, and most of the babies that are delivered in Harare and beyond are delivered at those 14 polyclinics. The main one being the Edith Opperman Maternity Center in Bare, conveniently located less than 500 meters from Bare Msika. So you have all sorts of expectant mothers from literally every nook and cranny in Zimbabwe getting onto a bus when they're on the verge of delivering babies, in the safe knowledge that they'll get to Mbare, disembark, and 500 meters away, they did it Opperman.
But that infrastructure has not expanded since independence. I mean, the clinics that you're mentioning right now, Wilkins included, Beatrice Road Infectious Hospital have not been expanded to cater for the expansion in the population in Harare. And it's because of the quality of the management the leadership that we have. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. In fact, it's not just the health services that have suffered in that regard. It's also the delivery or provision of potable water.
Right.
The infrastructures that were put in place have not been expanded in sync with the burgeoning population. Now let's just stay with the health services side for a bit.
Sure.
And I'll tell you that over 2,500 babies are delivered every month through those polyclinics.
Right.
It is open maternity center on its own delivers over 600 babies, followed by Mavuku, which serves Tafara. And the situation vis-a-vis Mavuku Polyclinic is a source of grave concern, because more recently, our government, in its infinite wisdom or lack thereof, decided that Caledonia Farm should be added onto the city of Harare. And
right.
Caledonia Farm alone has got in excess of just over 200,000 people.
Wow.
And that's almost as big as Pindura.
Now, this means, Much, that we are now faced with the COVID coronavirus crisis. The infrastructure is not up to scratch. The leadership capacity is constrained. Are we ready to deal with this pandemic?
We're not. I mean, by any stretch of imagination, because in fact, to bring things into even sharper focus, there are only 3 isolation hospitals in Zimbabwe. Wilkins Infectious Disease Hospital, Beatrice Road Infectious Disease Hospital, and Thorngrove Infectious Disease in Bulawayo. And the combined 3 isolation hospitals do not have more than 200 beds.
And in any case, I mean, the sense I'm getting now is that Wilkins has just been revamped following the death of Zororo Makamba in that place, which is a regrettable, very painful thing. So that institution has been in total neglect and disrepair. And one would think that the similar situation at the Beatrice Infectious Diseases Hospital.
Well, I wouldn't go to the extent of saying total disrepair and all that, because the services that are offered there were okay up until the scourge of the scale of this coronavirus. What those establishments were set up to do, Trevor, just to help the listeners get a keen appreciation of the background. Way back, there was need to contain contagious diseases like measles, pox, and so forth. And so an arrangement was entered into by central government with local government that a capitation fee would be paid by central government to encourage the local authorities' facilities to treat and manage these contagious diseases very well. So the problems in terms of capacity at those 2 isolation hospitals in Harare started in the mid-1980s, when we were lumbered with the HIV/AIDS scourge, and that had all sorts of issues that we didn't go into at this stage. That's when it was realized that in capacity terms, we were woefully wanting. And of course, the advent of Ebola also made that capacity issue, even more glaringly inadequate. And more recently, this coronavirus scourge is going to make the situation even worse.
I mean,
So,
as you're talking, Mooch, I'm thinking of, so nothing was done. It was discovered that capacity wasn't enough with the HIV/AIDS pandemic, the Ebola, but nothing was done to add onto the infrastructure. Hence, now we face this coronavirus totally unprepared.
mm-hmm. Yeah, but from a capacity point of view, Trevor, in terms of the health services personnel, I'm the first to admit that the caliber of staff that we have there is second to none, starting with Dr. Prosper Chandawengero Chonzi, the Director of Medical Services, and the other dental surgeons, the doctors, Hilda Barra, the Superintendent of Wilkins Infectious Disease Hospital, the matrons that we have, and over time, these people that work for the city health services have been better paid than their counterparts in government.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
And rightly so.
Mm.
But you have a situation, Trevor, just again to go back to something I think that needs to be mentioned. I mentioned when I was describing the committee system, the HR and General Purposes Committee.
Yeah.
Now that committee is responsible for the welfare of, when I first started, 11,883 employees of the city of Harare. Mm. And of course, the first thing I asked was, where are they? Who are they? Where are they? And what are they doing? And I put a system in place supported by the then resident director of the World Bank, Dr. Muchadeyi Masunda. He got 3 work-study practitioners two from Italy and 1 from Denmark. And the idea was to whittle down that number to 6,000 because the exercise that was done by those work-study practitioners indicated that the city could be run cost-effectively and efficiently by no more than 6,000 people.
So the situation you described to me, Mooch, is that the professional staff, your doctors, nurses, and matrons, we've got the best people there. But the top layer is these, political people that come in and overlay the system. But you have paralysis in terms of expanding the infrastructure, catering for the growth in the city. Am I right?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Trevor. Let me put it more bluntly. Amongst the 46 democratically elected councillors that I had occasion to work with, and the 11 special interest councillors, there was not a single one of them who had any medical qualifications.
Wow.
So how can the HR and General Purposes Committee plus the Health, Education, Housing and Community Services Committee provide the much needed oversight role when they themselves, the councillors, haven't got the foggiest clue about what it is that it takes to run those clinics, those hospitals. And in addition to that, I meant to mention, there were 32 primary healthcare centers that fell under the City Health Services Department.
I mean, Mooch,
and on top of that, sorry,
sure,
32 primary schools that are run by them. And there's not a single educationist amongst the councillors.
That's sad. That's sad. Mooch, as you're talking now, I'm getting to the point of the coronavirus. I am thinking of the crowding in Mbare, for instance, the crowding in Makokoba, which you know very well. I mean, how do you talk social distancing to somebody in Mbare who doesn't have running water, who has to drink water using their hands, and they live in very crowded infrastructure? How do you talk social or physical distancing in that kind of environment? All because our city fathers have not been strategic enough to plan for the expansion of the city. What's your view on that?
It's well nigh impossible. And it just does not make sense, because those very same people who look at you and shake their heads in utter despair, and they will be well within their rights to ask the question, where have you come from? On which planet do you live? So the point, Trevor, that we really need to make and focus our energies on is we are to blame for the caliber of the councillors that we have, as well as the members of the House of Assembly that we have, and as well as the senators that we have. And the cruel irony of it all is that we have amongst the highest literacy rates, not just in Africa, but in the world. What we need to do is to encourage honorable men and women who've got the skills to make themselves available to assist. And that's the one side of the equation. The other side of the equation, we need to appeal to the democratically elected councillors to be magnanimous enough, I think that's the word, magnanimous enough to accept that they haven't got the skills that are required to men or women those committees that we referred to, and therefore make things work in the council. So they need to accept assistance from wherever it may come. And the other idea that I was working on during my 5-year stint as mayor was to harness all these bright sparks that we have, and we churn them out from various institutions of higher and tertiary education, and make them serve on those committees. With, in fact, we would have to split those 8 committees into maybe 3 main clusters: the finance cluster, social services cluster, and maybe technical services cluster, and get the bright sparks that come out of all these universities that we have in the country to synthesize those board packs for councillors and reduce them to executive summaries of not more than 1 or 2 pages, capturing all, because there's no way that any of the councillors, have got the capacity that you and I have of plowing through a board pack that thick. It's just not part of their DNA.
Absolutely.
So we could have that 2-pronged approach. The doctors, the engineers, the architects, and who would serve in some kind of advisory capacity to these committees, and then these young bright sparks. It's a system, Trevor, that's not different from what happens in more mature democracies like the United States.
I think Much, the bottom line is that you and I have to step up to ensuring that when we elect councillors, we elect men and women who've got the skills and the capacity to do what a modern city expects. Let's leave that at that, Much, and move to the issue about how autonomous is the mayor of Harare? How autonomous are the councillors? Do they have free reign, or the government interferes and tells them what to do?
In my experience, I had no interference whatsoever from either Robert Gabriel Mugabe as president or Morgan Richard Tsvangirai as prime minister, or any of the other ministers. But I must say I had a tempestuous relationship with the cynical Ignatius Chombo, who was the minister responsible for local government. But we had our robust discussions behind closed doors, and I tried as much as possible to avoid allowing those spats to spill into the public domain. Because it's so easy to get sidetracked, from you take your eyes off the ball and then forget what you're there for. So that it's very important for anyone who gets into townhouse, either as councillor or ultimately as mayor, to look at the bigger picture issues. People want service, and I'm reminded of the immortal words that were uttered by Henry Fiorelli LaGuardia, who was the Republican mayor of New York, I think from 1933 to 1944. He said, there is no democratic nor Republican way of fixing sewers. In Zimbabwe, in the Zimbabwean context, there is no ZANU-PF or MDC way of fixing sewers. Once you are in that, you have to deliver.
Right.
And
Much, As we round off, given the fact that we're facing this coronavirus, what message would you have for central government as far as this issue is concerned?
My message is simply this, that whoever is in a relevant ministry vis-a-vis Harare, and I'm talking here of Minister of Local Government, Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Development, Minister of Health and Child Care, and people need to focus on the bigger picture issues. Because it's one thing for our president, Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, to wax lyrical about Zimbabwe being open for business. But when people come here, they'll want to see what's on the ground, infrastructure-wise and otherwise. And when potential investors come here and find that the infrastructure is not quite up to scratch, they will walk away. Because capital is a very timid animal, you know, and it's not like going where it's going to feel threatened and it won't have an opportunity to grow.
What message do you have for the public, us, the people that queue up and vote for these councillors that you're describing?
I think in a nutshell, I would say the Goya principle has to come into effect here. Get off your butt and get involved. Because nobody is going to help you or us to get Harare back to where it used to be. It was not by accident that Harare was called the Sunshine City, because you know, we've been favored with a whole lot of natural resources, including the weather. But we just need to build on all those things that our previous city fathers did and make this place better.
Awesome. Much, we'll get you back onto the show. We thought it was important to tap into your insights as the former mayor of Harare, as the country is under lockdown and facing this coronavirus. So thank you so much for finding the time in your hiding away from coronavirus to speak to us. Allow me, Much, whilst you remain there, to stand straight to our viewers at home. In the diaspora all across the world, please do stay safe. Do the basics that's required for you to stay safe. Wash your hands regularly. Observe social distancing and physical distancing. Remember, In Conversation is a weekly show, but during this coronavirus COVID threat, we'll be coming to you much more frequently than we've done before to give you the information that's necessary for you. Remember, we are weekly. Press this button to subscribe, and until next time, cheers.